Welcome back. This is our final video for our second day of Greek myth and tragedy class. And what I'm now going to do is give you a brief synopsis of the Persian Wars. As I mentioned in the previous video, we will return to the Persian Wars in a later video in more detail so that you can understand how that set the stage for the rise to power of Athens in the 5th century BC. But for right now, I'm going to give you the synopsis that you need to understand its connection with the play that was produced regarding the Persian Wars, Aeschylus' play Persians in 472 BC. So this play Persians is a unique play in ancient Greek tragedy. This play, first of all, is the very first play produced that we have surviving from any ancient Greek playwright. Also, this is the only play that we have surviving that describes a contemporary event in full detail, giving it, of course, a semi-mythical, semi-historical flavor in the course of the plot in the tragedy. But this is quite unusual because most ancient Greek tragedies, as we already know, tended to focus on mythical stories that were well removed from the contemporary historical goings-on in any of the Greek polis. So more on that in a little bit. First of all, the Persian Wars themselves involved the Persians coming in from the east. So that means coming in this direction for you, coming in from the east and coming over the northern coast of the Aegean Sea and also across the Aegean Sea by ship over to the ancient Greek world. We'll discuss the full details later of why that occurred. For right now, suffice to say that the principal reason why the Athenians became the target twice of the Persians was that the Athenians were closely connected with the cities to the east. First of all, in the Aegean world, the Aegean Sea, the islands, and then also over on the west coast of Asia Minor, all along what's now the west coast of Turkey, where the city is referred to as the Ionians. That we'll also talk about it more in a later lecture. The Ionians were closely connected by affinity with the Athenians due to their mythical history together and other cultural connections like the similarity of their dialect, of the Greek language and such. So when the Persians came in from the east and put a great deal of pressure on those Ionian cities, some of them naturally looked toward the Athenians for protection. The Athenians, in fact, did end up allying with one of the cities which tried to revolt against the Persian Empire. This city was called Miletus, and it would end up being destroyed 5 years after the initiation of the revolt, and this was just a couple of years before the onset of this particular war. Because the Athenians were allied with the enemy of the Persians who had long considered the Athenians to be an enemy city because they refused to provide earth and water, the tokens of submission from the Greek cities to the Persians. The Athenians and the Spartans notoriously were the only two cities in the ancient Greek world that refused to do that. So the Persians really did want to reduce the city of Athens and now had a reason to do it, in their view, because the Athenians had allied with their enemy in the revolt. So the Persians tried twice to invade the Greek world, first in the late 490s BC, that's why we have 493, and then again 10 years later after they were defeated by the Athenians the first time at Marathon. The actual battle that we're talking about in Aeschylus' play Persians is the Battle of Salamis in 480 BC, which was a victory by the Athenians led by this fellow, Themistocles. He was one of 10 Athenian generals in their government, and he was the one who took charge of the Athenian counter-campaign against the Persian invasion in 480 BC. The Battle of Salamis was essentially a trap that the Athenians laid for the Persians as they came in under the command of Xerxes with their fleet. The story goes that Themistocles sent a message to Xerxes that because the Athenians had been forced to evacuate their city when the Persians invaded by land and ended up taking over the city of Athens, they relocated all of the people in different areas to the south on the island of Salamis and also across the bay over at Troisden. Part of that involved putting the Athenians onto ships to get ready for the Persians to come in. So the story goes that Themistocles sent a message to Xerxes to bring the Persian ships down around the Gulf, the spit of land called Sunium, and come into the Bay of Salamis, because apparently all the Athenians were all stuck there with all their ships, and they were all crammed together, so that if the Persians could catch them there, then they'd be able to defeat the Greeks. So Xerxes apparently believed this and brought his ships around and ended up, in fact, walking into or sailing into a major trap. Now, this was, in fact, the second Athenian victory inflicted against the Persians in this 10-year period. Again, the first one was Marathon, 490 BC. The second one, Salamis, 480 BC. There actually would be a third one the next year, Mycale, 479 BC. Again, more on that in a future lecture. So, Xerxes, for reasons that the Greeks thought had to do with his overbearing, hubristic behavior of crossing from Asia over into Greece at all, overstepping his boundaries, ended up essentially being punished by the gods, as the Greeks saw it, and was defeated, was stopped in his campaign, and forced to withdraw with a tattered Persian fleet. Now, this victory became the stuff of legends in the Greek world for some time. Of course, the Athenians were very proud of the fact that they had scored this major victory and did not lose any opportunity to let the other Greeks know wherever possible that they had saved Greece by scoring this victory. And in fact, that was really true, because if the Persians had been able to get past the Athenians here, they would very easily have broken into the rest of Greece and would probably have eventually rounded up all of the other Greek cities and invested Greece into Persia. So for the Athenians successfully to stop the Persians here was a major success, not only on the part of the Athenians, but also the rest of Greece. That said, of course, it became a political point in favor of the Athenians that would have a big effect on the Athenians' later relations with the other polis as the 5th century BC went on. For right now, the play that you read, Aeschylus' Persians, commemorates the victory at Salamis from the side of the Persians. Also a very unusual point about this play, that we see a military victory, but we see it on the side of the defeated enemy. It's quite interesting to see a play being willing to see a victory from the side of a very hated enemy that was in fact defeated by the city that's producing the play. The person who put on the play is somebody that you must take very careful note of for later, because we're going to hear a lot about him. His name is Pericles, Pericles. Pericles would gradually grow in power in Athens to become one of the most powerful and influential Athenians in the 5th century BC, and would be responsible for the rise to Athenian power practically single-handedly. Again, more on him in a later lecture. But for right now, you should understand that this is the first appearance of Pericles anywhere in the Athenian public view. And as you can see, we're in darkness again, because Pericles would bring dark times upon the Athenians, as you will see later. Now, the plot of the play is quite simple. We simply have the Queen of Persia, her name is given to us as Atossa, A-T-O-S-S-A, who has become very disturbed about the possible outcome of the battle that Xerxes is trying to fight in over to her west, and consults with her counselors because she has just had a very disturbing dream in which she sees two women, one Greek and one Persian, getting into a fight and then actually being strapped down into a chariot, except that the Greek woman refuses to accept the yoke of the charioteer driver. When she comes around to talk to the counselors, she says that she tried to perform a sacrifice right after that, and she saw a strange omen of an eagle attacking a falcon. The eagle, of course, was a symbol of Zeus, so that again appeared to be a symbol of the Greeks getting at the Persians. So the counselors are unsure of exactly how to interpret either the dream or the omen, but all of them are concerned together that it does not bode well for the Persians. And in fact, as you saw in the play, there was a relatively lengthy opening monologue by the chorus before the queen herself came on stage, in which they discussed the major concern that they have, that Xerxes has been away for a very long time. There has not been any news from the campaign, and they are concerned that possibly something had gone wrong. They also were aware that Xerxes, when he crossed the Hellespont, which is the strait of water that comes down from the northeast down into the Aegean Sea, that he had had this incident whereby he would try to build a bridge to go across the water, and a couple of times a storm came up and destroyed the bridge. So Xerxes then had the bridge rebuilt and finally was able to get a bridge in place that would get everybody across the water. But then he carried out the strange act of whipping the water like this with whips in order to punish the water god that had destroyed the bridges. And then he went also so far as to round up all of the engineers who had built the failed bridges, the ones that collapsed in the two storms, and actually had them all executed. This was regarded as rather insane behavior, but also hubristic, overbearing behavior. Again, this was regarded as the key moment when Xerxes overstepped his bounds, physically actually, because the Hellespont separated Asia from Greece, that he overstepped, and as a consequence brought on the tragedy around him. So you can see that if Xerxes is carrying himself on as a military leader, but is going outside the boundaries of what is in fact acceptable, then he's going to be unable to restrain himself properly and unable to, in fact, be an appropriate leader for the Persians in this military campaign. So Xerxes crossed over into Greece, and at this point, according to the play, he's been earmarked by the gods as somebody who has let down his people, and history takes its course, and he ends up being defeated in this battle. So a messenger arrives back and gives the very famous description of the battle, in which we have the really stirring scene when the Persian ships sail to the island, and then all of a sudden signal fires everywhere pop up all around the island of Salamis, and also up on the cliff where Athens is, and also way over on the other side where Troyes was. They light up the water at night, and a trumpet is sounded, and a voice rings out. This is the opportunity now for all of you Greeks to free Greece from the tyranny. The time is now. I'm paraphrasing, of course. But the messenger delivers this very unhappy news to Queen Atossa and the counselors of the city to indicate that, in fact, Xerxes has been vanquished in the battle that occurred at Salamis. This very stirring account, of course, gives a very high opinion of the Greeks as they unite at Salamis to throw off the yoke of tyranny that the Persians were trying to impose upon them in order to take them over. The Greeks fought for their freedom and were successful at liberating their country, including the Ionians eventually, from Persian rule. So the queen, of course, is distraught to hear this. She then pours a libation at the tomb of her deceased husband Darius, the father of Xerxes, and the one who led the previous campaign that fell short at Marathon. Darius, the ghost, when he comes up, hears the news and is really upset because he realizes that Xerxes has ruined a lot of his own good work in building up the Persian rule. It is quite unusual to see a ghost in any ancient Greek or any Roman piece of literature. So this is quite a stirring scene, especially to have a ghost summoned from the underworld in this way. Darius predicts, as of course was known to be historically true, that the year after the Battle of Salamis, 479 BC, the Spartans would inflict another defeat against the Persians, this time on land, at the Battle of Plataea. If you saw the movie 300, you remember that the actor who has been, I should say the narrator who has been telling the story about Leonidas and Thermopylae, also in 480 BC, now leads the Greeks at the very end into the battle that would in fact become the Battle of Plataea. That's not actually historically accurate as to how that's shown, but that is in fact what occurred, that the Spartans did avenge themselves for what happened at Thermopylae in 480 BC to defeat the Persians at Plataea. So that's forecast by the ghost of Darius in this play. And then, as you saw, the close of the play is the arrival of Xerxes' home in disarray. The queen withdraws to the palace in order to get the palace ready for his arrival, and in case there were any medical needs and other types of assistance. And there was a long lamentation carried out by the chorus to close the action of the play. So this is your first play, Persians. At this point in history, the Athenians are in very powerful political shape. They have started to build a reputation of excellence both in politics and in the military sphere. The Spartans really very reluctantly had to take Athenian power into account and recognize that Athenian power had saved Greece. So recognize that right now the Athenians are in superb shape with their reputation, and Pericles is also himself in superb shape to be able to build up Athenian power and his own authority over the city of Athens. Well, that finally wraps it up for our second day. We're now moving to the next play by Aeschylus called Seven Against Thebes. And although it's only a few years later after this one in production, already we're starting to see changes in the status of the Athenians with the Greeks. So we'll return here tomorrow and discuss our second play. We'll see you here tomorrow.